Hey, this is Class Creatives, and in this video we'll look into exactly what is happening with Pixar and Disney's 3D animated features and what might be holding them back lately, which has been allowing Sony Pictures Animation's latest movies to stand out and connect with audiences. Are Disney and Pixar starting to lose their magic that they once had, or are they still the king of 3D and 2D animation? We'll look at how animators and artists are doing their best to push the artistic limits with each movie given constraints that the studio places on them. Sony has been killing the game recently with K-pop Demon Hunters and the Spider-Verse, taking big risks and using bold art styles to hook audiences across the world. So we figured it would be a great idea to look at what is going on with Disney and Pixar and how Sony Pictures Animation and even DreamWorks are giving the audiences what they are demanding, while Pixar and Disney seem to have lost that golden touch they used to have, resorting to numerous sequels and following old formats to generate what seems to be most important to them, the money, versus focusing strictly on pushing the art, stories, and characters, which is how they got to be at the top in the first place. We'll talk about how Pixar and Disney create their recent movies, what might be the root of why they can't seem to be as daring or experimental as Sony Pictures Animation or other studios hopping on graphic hand-drawn trends, how they are using AI and techniques similar to Sony. We'll look at some of the video references that animators use to create genuine acting performances, and how studios approach the process based on the style of animation. And of course, as always, we'll talk about the keyframe animation process. We recently did a video about how Sony is dominating 3D animation, and some are claiming them to be the new king of animation. So if you want to see detailed breakdowns on Sony's internal workflows, be sure to check that one out. This time around, we'll look a bit more closely into the workflows of Pixar and Disney. Pixar has been struggling lately, and they've been blaming audiences for not showing up to movie theaters when they bomb at the box office, creating new stories and characters. Pixar and Disney are often regarded as the best in the world when it comes to the art of 3D animation, and animators and 3D artists often have dreams of working at their studios to be part of the magic that they have created in the past. But are they truly making the best art, stories, and memorable characters in 3D animation? Or is it pure nostalgia, name recognition, or perhaps for the prestige to have Disney or Pixar on your resume, that so many artists still place them at the top of all 3D animated feature studios? Sony Pictures Animation has been slowly taking the crown away from Disney and Pixar with striking visuals, relatable characters, and stories like The Mitchells vs. the Machines, and recently with K-pop Demon Hunters. And of course, they have completely changed the animated movie landscape with the Spider-Verse franchise, using all new workflows and techniques to give audiences a visual style that they have never seen before in animated feature films. We can see the striking differences in how Disney attempted a watercolor-inspired theme with Wish compared to the watercolor world of Gwen and Across the Spider-Verse. Sony's unique drippy hand-painted effects versus Disney's subtle and forgettably dull ode to the past. It's not that Pixar and Disney do not do a ton of research or tests with each movie that they develop. In fact, they are pushing their rigging, cloth sim, 2D integration, and implementing graphic textures into their movies. They are also experimenting with 2D elements in recent shorts, such as Once Upon a Studio, resurrecting 2D classic animation with their 3D animated characters, and Pixar gave us a nice fresh take on mixing both mediums on Win or Lose on Disney+. So it's not that they are not trying to be expressive with their art, but due to the fact that Disney and Pixar are considered the gold standard when it comes to animation in general, and the history that comes with that legacy, they're in a tight spot where they need to innovate and tell new visual stories, but they also need to stay true to the history of their branding. Let's take a quick look at some of the hand-painted workflows Pixar has been putting into their more recent movies.
Who's awakened by the roar of the crowd? To cheer the underdog team to victory!
For Elemental, the characters faced a challenge for the characters Ember and Wade, as they were not traditional characters which usually rely solely on bones and joints for rigging and animation. They had to incorporate fluid, boneless characters of fire and water. This required them to rethink the workflows when it came to skin and cloth animation. Pixar used machine learning research to create the stylized look of the volumetric elements that enhanced tools they already had developed. They tried many tests and settled on the fact that the fire couldn't simply be looped to feel realistic and dynamic, so they knew it had to be a real simulation with an emphasis on character. The artist felt comfortable using this kind of AI approach since the volumetric style transfer was targeting images that were hand-painted by their internal artists. They make sure that they only use their own IP when it comes to this type of internal model training. They also wanted to have the animation enhance the characters' identities. So with Ember, they wanted fluidity and flexibility with no straight lines, curvy, and capturing the essence of fire even when she was just walking. To achieve these goals, they turned to 2D animation, and they had to carefully navigate collaboration with all departments with the shading, rigging, modeling, effects, and animation departments to achieve the look. With Wade, they wanted soft, round, and fluid designs with no sharp edges. They created numerous tests to capture his water droplet head shape, his iconic hair wave shape. The hair ended up being a water simulation that would react depending on if he was moving or staying still. They also had to ensure that for his facial animation that it was realistic and transparent, and that it would not obscure his facial features when bubbles would form within his face. They had to get just the right balance to make him feel like water, get the right proportions, and make him feel like a natural personality. For both characters, they also had to define a volumetric silhouette, so if they were against another character or environment, they would still be separated. They ended up calling this a meniscus. Here we can see a test idea of what would happen if Ember and Wade were to sit at a park bench together. The test was on temporary models and were used to figure out what controls animators might need to capture their unique behaviors. In Lightyear, Pixar took an opposite approach to 3D handcrafted characters and went as far as kit bashing some models from ILM, incorporating elements used in the Star Wars universe for the sci-fi aesthetic. Although the style was pushed more towards realism, the characters still look like the Disney Pixar style universe. Even Buzz's personal companion character Socks feels on brand, robotic movements and all. For Turning Red, they took inspiration from anime trying to push exaggerated eye and mouth movements and emphasizing snappier and more direct movements like anime rather than the traditional smooth movements with pushed arcs. And they sprinkled in some anime-inspired approaches in their face lines to enhance expressions, and action lines to emphasize movement and energy to try and give anime vibes. These elements still stay within the Pixar universe and are subtle touches rather than big and bold like the Spider-Verse or the Mitchells. They took some new approaches with the grooming and shading of the panda, realizing that longer hair was necessary to enhance the visual storytelling and character appeal. They also had to keep in mind, of course, whenever there was contact with the fur for shots. For the movies of Turning Red, Luca, and Soul, Pixar started to experiment and integrate their tools that would generate ribbons, which were geometric strips that had varying thicknesses, so that an effect could differ if it existed on the inside or outside of a curve. This effect would also vary depending on distance to the camera to help characters pop more in the frame. Shadows were also enhanced by the ribbons, even allowing color variation and deformation over stretched areas. The edge color even could be varied depending on the distance from the object casting the shadow on the ground. So as we can see, Pixar applies these special techniques very subtly to their movies, versus using it in a very bold, in-your-face approach like other studios. Again, playing it fairly safe, while keeping everything in the Disney universe. With Soul, some subtle 2D animation was applied throughout various parts of the movie, fitting the Disney Pixar aesthetic. The procedural lines helped give some extra volume to the shapes of the characters and help strengthen their silhouettes. In the test, it's a bit more obvious that the 3D characters have outlines drawn on them, but in the final render, it's a pretty seamless effect that is most likely what they intended. Again, another safe play for Pixar and Disney to remain on model and not be too bold, giving audiences what they are familiar with from their art styles. So we can see from taking a look at some recent Pixar movies, it's not that they are not doing research or applying new methods to their existing workflows to enhance their art. They aren't pushing the limits per se, but the technology is definitely there. They are just doing it much more discreetly than other studios, at least for now. And when it comes to Disney's branding, it's not just the movies or the streaming services that they have to consider either. They have to think about how the characters will match in their theme parks, merch, and other revenue streams that are so important to their executives and bottom line metrics. These constraints also extend out to the storylines they tell, and the narratives of the hero characters, not just the designs or art itself. Due to all of those restrictions, Disney definitely plays it safe. Even with their live-action movies, they gave us Stitch in 3D, but what do you think if instead of the live-action version we got, it was Stitch in 3D mixed with 2D animation in the style of the Spider-Verse or the Wild Robot instead? Disney definitely is limiting the freedom that artists have, especially with their classic characters, unlike Sony, which is giving a lot more creative freedom to their directors and artists to experiment and create art styles we have never seen before. This of course comes at a price, as Phil Lord and Chris Miller had hundreds of artists quitting the Spider-Verse's sequel due to working conditions that took a mental toll on them due to the constant visual story changes that occurred, causing finished, approved animation to be completely changed. 7-day work weeks and 11+ hour working days became the norm due to Lord's approval process and mentality about changes in animation leading to a better movie. He stated, "This change makes for a better movie, so why aren't we doing it?" Many artists that stayed chose to do so with the intention for their work remaining theirs to show for future employment opportunities. So although the visuals are some of the best we have ever seen, how sustainable is the actual process to the artists themselves who are responsible for the amazing visual look of the franchise? This has also impacted the release of the third movie. So although it seems Sony is winning in the visual 3D animation domination we've seen recently, at what cost is it coming at the artists creating the true innovation of the series? Pixar has also had its fair share of production issues, with the executives mandating major story changes on Elio to the original director Adrian Molina, the director of Coco. They also changed storylines in Win or Lose to reflect what Disney wants for their company representation. These on-brand executive mandates are what have been limiting Pixar from creating bold, new, riskier movies that they have done in the past that made them an award-winning animation studio compared to now having to apply creative limits that fit into the Disney universe. The results from Pixar have been the widely criticized bean-shaped mouth designs for characters like Elio, Luca, and Turning Red. We even saw the style back in 2015 on Spot and The Good Dinosaur. This has been a style of Pixar's character design for over a decade. So it's not only that they are playing it safe with stories, but they have to consider keeping a consistent look with their designs that they have created previously, so that it looks like all the characters can exist in the same universe and not look out of place when they are together in whatever marketing Disney creates with their lineup of popular characters. Is it your dream to someday work for Disney, Pixar, or Sony Pictures Animation? If not, feel free to skip ahead to the next section or stick around if you're just curious about what they look for in artists they want to hire. We create videos like this one to not only show you how 3D animated features are made, but to also give you a chance to learn the exact workflows necessary for your career or even your own personal projects. Most feature animation studios will want my experience or something equivalent if you are an animator, or ZBrush or equivalent for character sculpting. Several of our instructors actually work for Disney, Pixar, and Sony, and you can learn from them in our courses covering everything from animation and rigging to environment and game design and character creation. We'll have some links in the description if you're interested in taking your art in a new direction with us. Disney gave us a sneak peek at what the Spider-Verse would later expand upon with 2D and 3D art back in 2012 with Paperman that won an Oscar. Hand-drawn 2D elements mixed with 3D characters. Unfortunately, it was only a short and just in black and white, and it's a shame that they still haven't given us what we really want, mixing 3D and 2D animation mastery with great stories and new characters. Over a decade later, and fans are still asking for a movie with this kind of look from Disney. In 2014, Disney won another Oscar for their short Feast, which gave us 3D animated characters with a hand-drawn look. With these two shorts, Disney had the recipe to break through 3D animation with fresh new visuals, but again never took the full leap, expanding on these award-winning animated short ideas to a full feature, missing an opportunity to capitalize on what audiences were asking for from them. Recently, a group of Disney artists created an animated short film called Forevergreen that captures and expands upon this style nicely. They gave the main character hand-painted textures to give them the appearance of a handmade wood figure, to match the signature wood-carved aesthetic of one of the co-director's specialties of creating wood carvings. So it seems that even Disney artists themselves need to self-fund their own projects if they want to create personal art in the style they want to pursue without the restrictions of the Disney branding. So are they afraid of the production nightmares happening at Sony and want to keep everything safe with workflows that are familiar to their studio before diving into a full feature using the technology, or rather just afraid of putting out a risky visual styled movie that won't hit $1 billion in the box office sales? Only time will tell if we'll see something bold like the Spider-Verse, the Mitchells vs. the Machines, or even K-pop Demon Hunters that can somehow be on brand for Disney. DreamWorks has already followed the trend with Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Bad Guys, and The Wild Robot. Paramount gave us Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem. We got Arcane from Fortiche, revolutionizing the episodic direct-to-Netflix format. We also got nice visuals with Nimona and Intergalactic from Double Negative's animation studio that also pushed hand-drawn visuals that were very similar to the look of the Spider-Verse and was mostly well received when it came to audience reviews. And back to DreamWorks, their technological advancements in 3D animation line editing has enabled movies like The Bad Guys and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish to incorporate artist hand-drawn lines and automatically generate silhouette lines to achieve this distinct artistic style that we have been seeing lately. These types of tools, which are being used across 3D animated movies, are allowing artists to focus on the art and visuals versus having to manually generate these expressive artistic touches by hand, which should result in more creative output to audiences. Pixar sort of gave us some 2D styles thrown into some of their movies in very subtle ways, but in the end, these all failed to hit that coveted $1 billion box office grossing amount that is so important to them. So perhaps that adds to some of the resistance in fully committing to a full feature in a new style, as they have not hit $1 billion with the look yet, and so they have not attempted a full-blown hand-painted 2D animated full-length production. They stated for Inside Out with the Bluefy sequence and Win or Lose, they had a small team of 2D animators that made it possible to implement traditional animation. So we'll have to see how it will fully integrate into a full feature from Disney or Pixar. We might be in for our first taste of Disney and Pixar hopping on the trend with Gateau, but we'll have to wait until 2027 to see their take on a 2D hand-painted texture and shaded 3D animated movie with the animation director of Luca bringing the cat story to life. We suppose it will be Pixar's chance to tell another cat story in what looks like something we've already seen with Oscar-winning animated feature Flow, also featuring a black cat. That was made all in Blender with a $4 million budget consisting of a team of first-time animators. And don't forget we'll have Toy Story 5 where the toys will battle an iPad and other electronics. Meanwhile, Disney Animation Studios will be giving us Zootopia 2 and Frozen 3 in 2027. However, they do have Hex slated for 2026, that is an original movie. Maybe we'll see something then. But either way, it seems we might have a while to wait to see if Disney Animation Studios brings us something visually fresh like other big studios have been giving us recently. Since Disney and Pixar seem to get the message when we don't show up to theaters for their new original movies, perhaps if we didn't show up to their numerous sequels that generate them over $1 billion each time they make one, they might lay off those cash grabs and be forced to really push something new for us to enjoy. In the end, it seems that Disney and Pixar are more than capable technologically and talent-wise to create a handcrafted, stylized, 2D enhanced feature film, much like what we have been getting from other studios like Sony, but juggling all of their limitations seem to make it difficult for executives to give the green light to artists creating something different. They have to not only stay on brand, but also juggle the release schedules of Pixar, their Marvel franchises, their Fox animation releases, in order to hit what is most important to them, their box office gross sales, which all ends up limiting what Disney can do to remain the king of animation and bring us fresh new stories and animated looks, which is how they got to be at the top in the first place. And it's not that Disney and Pixar are not developing a lot of internal tools, doing a ton of research, and testing for their movies. They just have to do it a lot more carefully and in line with the list of restrictions to get the execs to approve the art, which limits how big and bold they can get with their art style, which at the moment is the opposite mindset of Sony Pictures Animation and other big studios. Did you smell GPT? Well, we don't use AI to generate our scripts or make our videos. And we hope you enjoyed our insights and the research that we did for this video, diving into tons of Instagram posts, interviews, and documentaries to highlight Pixar and Disney's animation process together. So what do you think? Are Disney and Pixar still the king of animation and making the best animations in the world still when it comes to 3D animation? Or is Sony starting to take that position with their handcrafted visuals, characters, and storylines? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.
Perfect.